How does one fund the opening of an OBL?
Assuming you don't have access to money by selling your third vacation home in Miami or a rich uncle deep in your family tree, you'll have to find financing sources to pay for your outpatient lab. This costs a lot of money. So let's leave aside ASCs, ambulatory surgery centers, for another day. That's a different animal which costs millions of dollars, largely due to regulations involved. For outpatient office-based labs such as these facilities can be built. I've done it on a shoestring budget starting at the low end of around the $400,000 range all the way up to the $1.2 million range. At the simplest level, financing for such a project can be done by seeking out a loan, typically from direct lending from a bank. But let's say you're uncomfortable with that level of risk. You can cede some of that risk and responsibility by approaching a managed services organization, an MSO, which comes in many different forms. The differences in approach all comes down to one of risk and control. If you go to a large MSO that is in the business of building these types of office-based labs, you give up a certain degree of control over your day-to-day operations. But on the other hand, you also give up a large amount of financial risk. Since they are taking on some of the financial risk with the facility, they will expect a return on this investment. So typically, you can leave it to them. Typically, they will do some of the due diligence on the feasibility of opening an OBL. Now, let's say you don't want your bank account to be at risk for a personal guarantee for a long-term lease on a facility, which may or may not pan out. Well, the MSO organization may be willing to take on this risk, but it's going to be sometimes at the cost of losing personal control over your facility. So honestly, at the end of the day, it's important for you to ask who your funding source is and what level of control you're willing to cede in exchange for this funding. Odds are, if you left a hospital-based practice, you don't want to replace your old boss, the administrator in the C-suite, with a new boss who's in an MSO, who will tell you what devices you can use and what procedures you can do. A lot of us who seek this outpatient environment don't like an administrator in a suit mandating the type of care to be provided. So you may want to avoid a funding source who's asking for that level of control into your daily operations.